I'm Steve Pemberton, author of A Chance in the World. Some years ago, when I first put pen to paper, I believed I was writing a personal history, an origin story that maybe future generations of my family might read if they were ever interested. But over time, I came to understand it was never just my story. It was a map for those who might feel lost, a mirror for those who wondered if they were alone, and a message for anyone who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or unsure if they'd ever truly belonged. Books offer a story, but they also have an ending. A podcast, though, offers a conversation, a chance to pause, to reflect, to go deeper, to find a common story. So this podcast isn't just a retelling of a book. It's a reawakening of the truths it carries and an invitation to walk with them, especially when the road feels uncertain. This podcast is for anyone navigating hardship, holding on to hope, or searching for signs that healing is still possible. It's for the people I meet all the time who walk through the world carrying a quiet courage, waiting for a reason to believe that beginnings do not dictate endings, and that even in the hardest chapters, goodness can still find a way. So, if you're listening for inspiration, insight, or simply a reminder that the human spirit is not easily broken, well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Pemberton Podcast, a space for stories that lift, lessons that linger, and chances worth taking. Produced by David Alexander. As far as college commencements go, mine was a standard one. The caps and gowns, the speeches that blurred together, the eager faces of graduates ready to step into their futures. But looking back, I can see that the trumpets I heard that morning weren't just for the class of graduates. They were calling to me personally, urging me forward, imploring me to finally solve the mystery that had lingered in the background of my life for as long as I could remember. Where had I come from? Despite the normalcy I'd found, that question had always been there, hovering just beneath the surface. But on that day, as I stood on the threshold of one chapter closing and another beginning, it felt more pressing than ever. I had come a long way from the young boy who had once carried his belongings in a green garbage bag. By the time I left for college, I had graduated to a beat-up yellow suitcase, the one John and I tossed into the trunk of his two-seater MG that he had swapped for his weathered green Volvo. The drive from Westport, Massachusetts to Chestnut Hill that warm August afternoon was a beautiful one, the kind of day where the sun seems to cast everything in a golden glow, as if the gods know how important this is to you and sends you a gift to mark the occasion. I remember staring out at the passing scenery, overwhelmed with excitement for the world I was about to enter, and, yes, a bit nervous too. But one of those worries wasn't how I was going to pay for college. That matter, at least, had been settled. A rejection letter from the Daughters of the American Revolution sat on my desk back at John's home, buried under an avalanche of college acceptance letters and scholarship offers. So many, in fact, that I had my pick of full scholarships to several schools. Among them was the one I had set my sights on since the 7th grade, Boston College. Boston College is a university right out of central casting as far as I'm concerned. An idyllic green lawn-filled campus greeted me with its Gothic architecture and clanging bells. It was warm and inviting and provided me a sense of sanctuary. And to this day, I think of it as home, the kind of home that stays with you, shaping who you are long after you've left. I wasn't Irish or Catholic, but Boston College said to me unequivocally, "You belong to us." But that wasn't the only message I received. As a Jesuit institution with a deep commitment to service, Boston College instilled in me a sense of purpose. The turbulence of my childhood, the struggles I had endured, they were not just obstacles to overcome, but experiences to be put to good use for others, the Jesuits informed me. And more than that, I had an obligation to do so. That realization had an unexpected effect. It made it nearly impossible for me to feel sorry for myself or mourn what had been lost. Instead, it pushed me forward, reminding me that even the hardest chapters of my past could serve a greater good. After some initial social and academic adjustments in my first year, I began to hit my stride. I pledged a fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi, and the older brothers taught me lessons about manhood, service, leadership, and accountability, lessons that still guide me today. And yet, despite the friendships, the academic success, and the feeling of belonging, I still carried an emptiness I couldn't quite define, a quiet but persistent ache, a deep yearning for my roots and for family. It was as if I had spent my life moving forward, yet some essential part of me remained just out of reach, something I could not fully grasp. At Boston College, I was surrounded by students who spoke proudly of their heritage. They knew where they had come from, the stories of their grandparents and great-grandparents woven into their identities like unshakable anchors. I envied that certainty. Why didn't I have that? I sensed that the last name I carried, Klakowitz, wasn't really mine. It felt like an ill-fitting coat, something draped over me, rather than something I had truly inherited. People often ask me about that name. What kind of name is that? I had no real answers. And when you don't know, those seemingly innocent questions, well, they don't feel so innocent. They become weights you carry, small reminders that you are a mystery, even to yourself. With every casual inquiry, I felt more like a nomad, wandering the world in search of roots and connections, latching on to the history of others, but having none of my own. The need to answer that question I felt most acutely on graduation day, when I attended it alone, watching as my classmates celebrated with their families. On that day, I wanted to stand on firm ground, to say this is who I am, not just in the present, but in some longer arc of history I imagined I'd come from. The problem was, I didn't know where to begin to find my family and had no clues to help me start. And in the days without an internet and technologies like Ancestry.com, this quest seemed virtually impossible. Then, I got lucky. But it wasn't luck. It couldn't have been. Some higher authority had decided it was time for me to know that maybe I was finally ready. And it arrived in 2 moments. Moments that are as vivid to me now as they were then. The first clue came shortly after my graduation when I called Mike Sylvia, my former social worker, hoping he had something, anything, that could help me. From the depths of my case file, he unearthed a detail so small, so unassuming, and yet for me, utterly life-changing. It was a name, my mother's name. I heard it for the first time, Marian Murphy. And suddenly, there it was. I could write it down, I could speak it aloud, I could make it real. For years she had been nameless, a question without an answer, an immeasurable void. Now, she had a name, a shape, a trace in the world. The second moment of clarity didn't come in the form of a name. It came through a gaze, a glance that lasted only a few seconds. but told an entire story. I had taken a summer job with Ruby Doughton in the Upward Bound program when an older man named Russell Almeida came to the program one afternoon to talk with the students. What got my attention was the way he kept looking at me. Have you ever been mistaken for someone else? It's a strange, almost disorienting experience. Not because someone gets your name wrong, but because of how they look at you. That flicker in their eyes is not confusion, it's recognition. As if just for a moment, you've stepped into a memory that doesn't belong to you. Slowly, almost involuntarily, Russell began to shake his head in certainty, almost as if he was saying, I know who you are. And I was thinking, how can you know that when I don't even know? Well, there was a reason for that. Because Russell Almeida didn't really see me. He saw someone else, my father, Kenny Pemberton. Those two pieces of the puzzle, hearing my mother's name and that look of recognition from a man who knew my father, gave me something I'd never had before. A place of origin and a history. And with that came an enormous sense of relief. Every river has a source, and every person has a beginning. But for some of us, that beginning lies buried deep beneath the surface where the currents are murky and the path is unclear. But the water still flows. It always flows. I wanted to know what were my parents' stories. Not just the version I had created in their absence, not the whispered assumptions or the incomplete fragments left behind by a foster care file, but real human stories, full of decisions and consequences, of love and loss, of paths crossed and uncrossed, to understand not only who Marian Murphy and Kenny Pemberton were, but what had happened to them. And a lot had happened to them. To be honest, I didn't see that at first. All I could see was their absence and the lost childhood that had come from it. And for years, I quietly carried that absence like a dark cloud that would simply not go away. I wore it as evidence that I had been forgotten. But as I began to uncover their stories piece by piece, I began to see not just my loss, but theirs too. It can be easy to stop at our own hurt. But I've come to learn that inherited pain too has a backstory, and that understanding is not the same as excusing. My mother, Marian Murphy, was once a young girl too. She and her sister were raised in a home marked by instability, a childhood shaped by the chaos of their mother's alcoholism. And as if that weren't enough, she watched her father leave to fight in World War II, uncertain if this hero of the greatest generation would ever be seen again. And that kind of fear, planted in a little girl so young, has a way of settling deep into the soul. She carried those scars with her into her adult life, trying to build something steady out of the unstable, searching for comfort in fleeting relationships, including with my father, trying to make sense of motherhood while still wrestling with the very same disease that had consumed her mother. And it was a battle she never stopped fighting. In one of the most heartbreaking entries in my case file, there's a conversation captured between my mother and a social worker. Over and over, she pleads to have her children return to her. At one point, she says, If you take my children away from me, I won't be able to live without them. And not long after the last of us were taken from her, she would pass away in a house fire. There's a temptation to define her by that harshness that so defined her life. But I don't do that. I try instead to remember the young girl who wanted to be loved, who missed her father, who carried hope even in the face of chaos, and more than anything else, a woman who desperately wanted to be a mother. She was not just a woman who lost her way. She was a mother trying to find it, with all the odds stacked against her. And Kenny Pemberton, my father, was more than the man who had not claimed me. He, too, was a young boy who watched the disintegration of his own family when his mother died of a heart condition at the age of 40. Shortly after that, he was sent to a group home where he learned to fight as a means of survival. It turned him into one of the top amateur fighters in the world, but like my mother, he was still carrying the burdens of that which had been lost. One of the lowest points in his life came when he was arrested and imprisoned for a crime he insisted he didn't commit. For 8 long months, he sat behind bars awaiting trial and holding on to hope. During that time, he poured his thoughts into a series of letters to his close and loyal friend, George Carmo, letters that George kept safe for more than 25 years. And eventually, he passed them on to me. Those letters capture my father's voice, and I can share it with you now, and not just through these words, but quite literally. Through AI technology, I've been able to approximate what he might have sounded like. It's not perfect, but it's close. And for someone like me who never got to hear him speak in life, close is everything. So the voice that you're about to hear is a digital reconstruction, but the words, every single one of them, are his.
Dear George, I know you have trouble putting words together when it comes to writing to a brother under such circumstances. Truth is, I've been having trouble putting those words together myself. But you know I look at you as my own little brother. I'll tell you something I never told you before. I had a little brother once. His name was Gordon. He passed away real young. That's how I look upon you. And I love you in the very same way. I can't tell you nothing about my case because I don't discuss it with anyone but my lawyer, and I don't say nothing in letters. But I can tell you this. I have done nothing, and I'm quite confident everything will work out just fine. Still, I'll never forget the last 8 months of my life. I've been to hell and back. But I'm sure I can take it for another month or so. I'll be just fine. I should be going to court in about 3 weeks. I won't let you down. I'll hang in there. Everything will be all right. It really gets to you when you're facing life or death, but the worst is over now. It's just a matter of 10 days to go. I got a letter from Marian yesterday. She's a pretty good kid, but I'll never get married to her. I don't believe I'll ever get married, period. The only love I've known has been a destructive kind, so maybe I'm a little down on the love thing. I lost the only girl I ever really loved, and I'm not over it yet. Guess it's something I'll just have to live with. But I'm glad you're happy in your married life. I'd only want you to have the best. I remember when you wanted to get married and I was in your corner. I believe a man should do what he feels in his heart, and that's why I told you if that's what you felt, then do it. Your heart is the way to happiness for most people. I remember the time you and Ronnie took my father's car and it caught on fire. We were going crazy trying to figure out what to do first. I used to do my thing on that scooter. Remember when we were riding double after you fixed it? I think about that summer and the fun we had. I think about it every day. Take good care and stay cool. Jail isn't a place fit for a dog to stay in. But I'll be seeing you on the outside, free again, real soon. Give the wife and baby my best, also Mom and the family. Tell Mom I said hello and I'm keeping the faith, Brother Kenny.
He was just 21 years old when he wrote that letter. 21. And yet reading his words now, you hear the weight of a man who had already lived through more than most do in a lifetime. The heartbreak, the hope, the defiance, the deep loyalty to a friend, the weariness of someone fighting for his freedom and trying to hold on to his faith in the process. When I first read this letter, it stopped me cold. Not just because it was written by my father, but because it revealed a side of him I had not fully understood. A loyal friend. A young man wise beyond his years whose life was teetering on the edge, but who still somehow found the strength to encourage someone else. And the line that hit me the hardest.
The only love I've known has been a destructive kind.
That one sentence spoke volumes to me. Not only about what he'd endured, but about the future he didn't think was ever going to happen for him. And yet still, even in his darkest moments, facing the very real possibility of a life behind bars and very likely a lonely one outside of it, he still said,
"Everything will be all right. I'll be seeing you on the outside, free again, real soon."
And he was right. He would be acquitted. But I don't think my father was ever truly free. The weight of all that had been lost, time, family, connections, pressed heavily on him. That despair lingered, and in time it led him down a path that would cost him his life. My parents weren't bad people. They had bad things happen to them, starting in their own childhoods, and had the kind of experiences they didn't have the tools to overcome. But the more I came to learn about both of them, I came to understand that neither of them wanted the kind of childhood that unfolded for me. And I think they had their regrets too. I believe my mother wished she had fought harder to find the help she so desperately needed. That maybe she should have accepted the support that her family desperately tried to give her. And that if she had, she would have been able to keep her children, to bring us home, and rewrite a story that was slipping away from her. And I believe my father regretted not telling his family about me. He had no way of knowing that the Lefwichers, who knew he was my father, would keep that truth to themselves. And of all that they did, that may be the deepest wound, because they had the power to bring me to his family and simply chose not to. I know the Pembertons would have taken me in as one of their own, because that is what they did later on in my life. But as a young boy, they would have raised me, anchored me, and gave me roots. They would have loved me because they loved him. And yet, despite it all, my mother and father had hope. And that hope, fragile as it may have been, was passed down to me, even if I didn't know it then. I live with it now, not as a burden, but as a promise to them. I've tried to build the life they were denied, to honor the story they didn't get to finish. But still, I've come to understand that healing doesn't always arrive in the time we want. Sometimes it shows up later. Sometimes it comes in our imagination. And if my parents could see me now, if they could walk into the home Tanya and I built together, hear the laughter, feel the warmth, see the stability, they would know what healing looks like. I can imagine my mother taking long walks with Tanya, smiling at her quiet strength and her light-the-room radiance. She would have seen Tanya as a kind of partner every mother hopes their son finds, steady, kind, fierce in love, and good enough for her son. And she would have had the kids laughing, telling them stories of just how their father did the very things he's now telling them not to do. My father would have been outside, likely shadowboxing with Quinn and Vaughn, and then coming inside to bounce Kennedy on his knee while helping her with some school project she didn't want help with, but secretly appreciated. He would have watched them, my children, and seen not just his grandchildren, but living proof that his life still echoes in this world. And perhaps that is what he sees now. My parents would have been proud. They would have been proud of the man their son became. Not because I was perfect or have all the answers, but because I kept going, and in doing so channeled the best of them. Because in the end, that's what I carry with me, not just their story, but the one they never got to live. I live that life now, a life of love, of meaning, a life with a new beginning. But I do that for them, and for me, and for my children and grandchildren, and for anyone who's ever wondered if something whole could grow out of that which was said was never going to have a chance. But it can, and I am living proof of it. In the next episode of A Chance in the World, I sit down with the person who set this entire journey in motion, the one whose quiet question created a ripple that is still unfolding. It's a conversation decades in the making, and one I've been waiting to have for a long time. We'll see you next episode.
If something you heard today moved you, stayed with you, or made you think differently, I hope you'll share it. Over the years, I've come to see that our stories, when shared, really can light the way for someone else. If this episode has resonated with you, consider subscribing, leaving a review, or simply passing it along. This is the Pemberton Podcast, produced by David Alexander. Thanks for listening.